First things first, I know you were a referee that loved having a bit of banter with the players. I know that Paul Ince, for example, was one you had a bit of a laugh and a joke with. But can you tell me some anecdotes about your time refereeing, some particular piece of banter that stood out while you were in your career?
I mean, people say to me, how would you survive? How would you feel refereeing today? It's a different world. It's a bit like saying, was George Best as good as Thierry Henry? You know, we're talking about different players from different generations. And in the era that I was fortunate enough to referee in, man management was the key. And we had a lot of referees who'd have some banter with the players. I mean, some people would say, you know, it's not a laughing matter, it's our job. But it was our job as well, because I was part of the first group of full-time professionals. And I always found, and it's not rocket science, this, if your boss at work is bollocking you and, you know, you're always in trouble, whereas he talks to you and educates you and, you know, talks you on the same wavelength, who are you likely to have more respect for? And in refereeing, a bit of a joke, you know, a player coming up to me and effing and blinding and screaming at me that, you know, that was never a fucking free kick or whatever. Um, the next minute, he put a pass astray, running alongside him and going, that was shite, that, you know. And he turns around and says, aye, fair comment. Now, might not be textbook, but that was the camaraderie that went on. You mentioned Paul Ince. Paul Ince, still friends with him to this day. In fact, his assistant referee, Alex Ray, many years after I'd finished refereeing, Alex got in touch with me a couple of times and said, oh, me and Ince are in bother from Saturday. How we're going to get out of this one. And they told me what had happened, and I said, "You're not getting out of that one." But you know, man management taught the players, taking the heat out of it. Whereas now, I know it's a different game. The game is much faster, more intense. There's much more at stake. But when was the last time you ever saw a referee on the television or in a stadium ever smiling, looking as if he was enjoying what he was doing? They're under intense pressure all of the time, and it's not being helped. I mean, VAR was supposed to help match officials. I would argue that it's done exactly the opposite on many occasions, and you know, chopping and changing interpretations through a season. You know, how many times have they looked and re-looked at handball? And when I'm at a game now and people say to me, Jeff, was that a handball? I say, I haven't got a bloody clue what a handball is anymore, because they do change it from week to week. And you imagine in any other walk of life, you have got yourself to the very top level. You know, these referees have been refereeing for a number of years, coming up through the system, learning the tricks of the trade. They get to the very top. It's a very steep learning curve because you're going from, you know, refereeing at Exeter, Carlisle, or wherever, and then eventually, you know, you're in the Premier League with the pressure that's on you there. So, but you've got your confidence, you've got your experience, but memo from the boss, oh, that what we gave as a handball last Saturday isn't going to be a handball next Saturday. And you're thinking, well, all that expertise, all that confidence in knowing what you're doing is being changed almost on a knee-jerk reaction basis because there was a lot of talk and a lot of dialogue over a certain couple of decisions the previous weekend. So now we're going to have a clamp down on this, or now we're going to do that. And, you know, most recently, I'm just starting to calm down now after watching the Leicester Chelsea game at the weekend. The tackle by Ndidi on Cole Palmer is probably one of the worst tackles I've seen all season. And VAR construe that the yellow card was sufficient punishment. Now, they might be right. I might be living in the past. But when a player jumps in and rakes his studs down the Achilles of a player, when he hasn't got a cat in hell's chance of playing the ball, and then they're starting to talk about there wasn't excessive force. It doesn't take excessive force to snap someone's Achilles. And when the ball is in front of the player, it wasn't a mistimed tackle. It wasn't a hard, fast tackle. And if he'd have got there a second earlier, he'd have won the ball. He was never, ever going to win the ball. And whilst we're getting tweaking and messing about with things like what's a handball and what isn't a handball, threatening injuries like that, or what could have been a career-threatening injury, seem as if it goes away virtually unpunished. So I'm left pulling my hair out at times.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I know when you talk about cards there, for example, you were renowned for trying to keep 22 players on a pitch. Every now and again, obviously, you had to act. Roy Keane, somebody you sent off, I believe, against Southampton. And then I don't think you refereed United for years or something like that. So can you tell me
Well,
about that situation and obviously what Roy Keane did on the day to get the sending off?
well, Roy Keane, in my book, I wasn't the most experienced referee on the Premier League, so you can't hold your hands up and say I was right all the time. I'd only been on the Premier League perhaps 2 or 3 years, I think, at that stage. Um, and I've cautioned Roy Keane early on, and then he commits another cautionable offence. And at that time, our hierarchy was wanting consistency. It was wanting strong refereeing. And I sent him off after it was only 25 minutes into the game, I think. And maybe it was coincidence. People say that the big clubs are the most powerful, but coincidence or not, I didn't referee Manchester United again for another 2 years. Now, when I was writing my autobiography, I looked up the facts and figures, and in that 2 year period, other than the teams that had just been promoted and had only perhaps been in the Premier League for a season, I'd refereed other teams, every other team, at least two, three times, and some of them 4, 5 times during that 2 year period. I didn't referee Manchester United again. Now, that just might be a quirk of fate, but other people might say, well, Manchester United weren't happy with me. And when I refereed them, and they were a powerful club and perhaps got what they wanted. I don't know the answer to that, but I've got my suspicions.
Yeah, and you mentioned your autobiography there. I wanted to ask about that. There was an amusing line in there about Liverpool. I think one of your final games refereeing them, and you wrote something like they applauded as you were coming off the pitch, something to that effect, and the asterisks were missed off. So can you tell me a little bit
Yeah,
about that and how it ended up?
I was taking the piss because, I mean, football fan, no one likes referees. Football fan, the only time football fans like referees is when they're giving decisions in their favour. But there's always been this wide held belief that, on Merseyside, the football fans are so aware of football and everything going on. And I just passed the comment. It's my last game there, memorable for a lot of reasons. And I just put the line in and I blew the final whistle, knowing it was going to be the last time I ever refereed at Anfield. And then I felt that the applause at the end of the game was stronger or went on. Perhaps the Liverpool fans knew it was my last game and they were showing their appreciation. And I'd put when we were doing the book, I'd put a couple of exclamation marks in. And when it came out, some people, as the gotta do, jumped onto it. What an arrogant prick, as if the Liverpool fans. But whilst I couldn't sort of stand up and say, no, no, I didn't mean that like that, it actually got people talking about the book. And as anybody knows, there's no publicity, no publicity is bad publicity. So I took that one on the chin, but no, I don't think there was a single person in Anfield that day would have known or cared. It was my last visit there as a referee and wouldn't have given a damn about me. But it was my sense of humour that unfortunately on that occasion didn't work. But as I said, perhaps it did work.
It absolutely did work because it obviously helped the book, and it's quite a funny story in the end. And while we're on the topic of Liverpool, I think you refereed Steven Gerrard in his debut. Can you tell me what he was like to referee?
Well, Stephen Gerrard, for a lot of reasons, became probably in my era, my favourite player. I mean, he was a Liverpool great, he was an England great, and some things happen. It's only when I was doing the research for the book that little things tick the box. And I do recall he made his debut right at the end of a game at Anfield. I was the referee and he was introduced. He also made his debut for England, I believe, at Wembley just before it was a World Cup or a Euros. And I was fourth official to three international referees, and he came on for his England debut. Um, and I was the one who checked his studs, etc., as he came on. And then obviously my last ever game at Anfield, and Mark Halsey was the fourth official that day. And unbeknown to me, at the end of the game, Stephen Gerrard's match shirt came in with a best wishes, Jeff, and his autograph on the back of it. And that's still, and then he later on became manager of Rangers, where I'm a season ticket holder. So I've been fortunate enough to share some good moments in Stephen Gerrard's career. But, as a referee, people often want to ask you about who you sent off and who you cautioned. I prefer to talk about players like Stephen Gerrard, Gianfranco Zola, Thierry Henry, and many others that, myself, with no real history in football, was fortunate enough to share a pitch with. So, it's not all bad memories refereeing. In fact, 99% of them are good.
Absolutely. And I just want to ask you one final question. Obviously, Middlesbrough and Rangers, two teams you adore so much. So, sort of tying this into one, Middlesbrough, I know that you were meant to referee, I think, a League Cup final, and then Middlesbrough ended up making it. Were you happy in the end that you didn't get the opportunity to referee? Because obviously, Middlesbrough got this fantastic opportunity. And with following Rangers, I imagine you must have gone on some pretty good European away days when they've played in Europe. So, have you got any memories from that period?
Yeah, I mean, from the Middlesbrough point of view, I first started going to Western Park when I was about 8 years old, I think. So I'd been a Borough fan all my life before I ever started or ever dreamt of being a referee. And now I'm fortunate enough to work for the club on the hospitality side on match days. And that particular night when it was the year of the Invincibles, Arsenal, and we played them in the League Cup, Coca-Cola Cup semi-final. And the second leg we went through at the Riverside, and someone was there from the Football League referees department and said to me after the game, "Well, not a good night for you, Jeff." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, you'd heard the rumours, no doubt. If Borough had got knocked out, you were going to referee the final." And I said, "Not bothered." And he couldn't quite relate to that because it was probably my last chance of getting a cup final. But I just said to him, "Look, I was a Borough fan long before I ever thought about being a referee. I'll be a Borough fan for the rest of my life. Middlesbrough getting to a cup final and hopefully winning the first trophy in the history, that's more important." And as it happened, I won the lottery because Middlesbrough got to the final. I think I refereed at Leicester City on the Saturday, then shot down to Cardiff and was there as part of Middlesbrough's supporters when we lifted the trophy. And 3 months later, I went back to Cardiff to referee the FA Cup final. So, I won both ways. They say referees aren't lucky. That was the one occasion that the referee did get lucky. And Rangers, my love of Rangers stems back from a football supporter, and loving Jim Baxter, a character. And I used to go up to Rangers, see some European games, way back when Ali McCoist, Mark Haley were playing for them. But it was only after my refereeing career finished, so sort of from 2004 onwards, I started going to games, eventually becoming a season ticket holder. And yes, some fantastic trips away into Europe. The camaraderie, like it is with Middlesbrough, any football fan can relate to this, the camaraderie of going with fans to see your team. The only problem for me, it's a 400-mile round trip. So I know the M74 like the back of my hands, but I mean, it's not only the Football League in Middlesbrough's case, of the SPL and European football with Rangers, I've also gone back to where I started. I started and my career was formed on the non-league grounds of the northeast of England, and I've become very much involved with non-league football. I'm a club ambassador for Stockton Town FC, who play in the Northern Premier League at the moment, and love going to their games just as much as I do those of Rangers or Borough. So football has always been my life, always will be my life. I was very, very fortunate to be involved in it in a period where I think you could really enjoy your refereeing. Like a lot of things in life, the money's got better, the terms and conditions have got better. But as when I bump into former players, as I do with great regularity on the after dinner speaking circuit, and former referees from time to time, we didn't have the money they've got now, but I do believe we had the good times, because refereeing at the moment, it does appear to have become a job of work. In my day, we were professional, but it was enjoyable as well. And I just hope, for the sake of the colleagues that are now refereeing, we can get back to something like that, and a little bit of common sense and sanity can come into the game.